off we go. Okay, so welcome to bonus class number 3. Don't worry if you missed any classes before, because they are all available on YouTube. Okay, so you can watch them on YouTube on our YouTube channel, which is SHP Financial Training. So if you have any problems finding those, there are actually links that should have been sent to you by email. Okay, by Anna. I'm sure they were. Okay. Good. So today we'll talk a bit about why the CFA program. You should already be a candidate in the program if you're watching this. You're going to get more benefit out of it because this class focuses on the pre-course reading, which you can do to make a start on your CFA studies now, so you can get ahead and be in a good position when we get closer to the exam. Okay, so you should hopefully know that some of the benefits include, just put you on mute, Joanna, hello. Okay.
This way. Excuse me.
Okay, yeah, welcome to the class, okay. Perfect. Okay, real world expertise. Why? Because the curriculum is updated every year to make sure it's still relevant. Career recognition. You get a lot of credibility when you become a CFA charter holder. So I'm a CFA charter holder. I know the exam process. I know what you are going through and will be going through. The exams are tough, but in recognition for that, you get a lot of credibility for having passed them, because people know that you really have a very strong base of knowledge, and also that you're a very determined individual, because you have to be determined and very focused in order to get through the program and to pass the exams. Okay. Ethical grounding, because 15% of each exam is actually based on ethics. Okay. Global community, so you will connect with around 135,000 CFA charter holders around the world. So I'm actually giving this class from England. There are around 10,000 CFA charter holders here. In Brazil, we have over 1,000, and the number has been increasing by around 15% annually, which is one of the fastest growth rates around the world. Okay, so there's a lot of growth in CFA charter holders in Brazil, and the CFA Society of Brazil offers some really good events locally in Sao Paulo, also in Rio, occasionally in Belo Horizonte. And many of those events are actually recorded, so you can watch them from wherever you are, which is really good as well. And then employer demand. So some of the biggest banks and most highly respected financial institutions employ CFA charter holders. So we've got a list here at the bottom: JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, etc. Okay, and in Brazil there are employers. The top employer of CFA charter holders is Itaú. Okay, in case you didn't know. So what will you learn? Well, you should know hopefully that there are 3 levels of exams. So the first exam, level 1, focuses on investment tools. So these are the instruments that you need in order to analyze investments. Okay, and what we mean specifically is quantitative methods, economics, financial reporting, corporate finance. And we use those tools in order to analyze different types of assets. So we've got equity, fixed income, derivatives, and alternatives. And then we bring everything together with portfolio management. So hopefully you can see underneath these, the little table with levels 1, 2, and 3, you can see underneath a list of the 10 topics which are included in each exam. And those 10 topics you will see in levels 1, 2, and 3, but the weights will change a little bit according to the level. Okay. Level 2 focuses on asset valuation, so more weight is given to equity, fixed income, derivatives, and alternatives. And at level 3, the focus is on portfolio management. That's synthesizing everything, bringing it together, and offering recommendations for portfolios, for return and risks, objectives, and also constraints for portfolios, like liquidity constraints, for example, for individual and institutional clients. And at level 3, there's a written paper. So levels 1 and 2 are just multiple choice, still quite difficult, but multiple choice. And at level 3, you will have a written paper in the morning where you have maybe 10 or 11 questions, and you need to respond to them with what we call constructed response answers, where you actually have to write. And then in the afternoon, it's a multiple choice question paper. Okay. So just within, you might be interested within alternative investments, we've got hedge funds, private equity, real estate, commodities, infrastructure, and other alternative investments. And then derivatives, we look at swaps, forwards, futures, and options. Okay. So we'll just move on to very briefly about regulatory waivers in Brazil. So people who have passed the CFA exams get some exemptions or are recognized in Brazil in order to act as portfolio managers, as research analysts, or in a couple of other categories, for example, a securities consultant, or as a pension fund manager. Okay, and you can find more information about those on the CFA Institute website, which also has the waivers that are available in other countries. So it goes countries all around the world. It shows you what eligibility you get in terms of local regulations around the world. Okay, so that's quite useful, quite interesting, depending on what your role is or what role you want to go into. Okay, and just a little comment. If anyone wants to interrupt me, please feel free. Okay, and if you're online, you can either chat in the chat box or you can unmute your microphone and then just ask me any questions. Okay, and we'll have time at the end for questions also. Okay, so our teaching methodology. We focus on the core subjects or the core concepts in the classroom, which are the things that are definitely going to come up in the exam because they are so fundamental to finance. For example, CAPM, Capital Asset Pricing Model. That is a way of working out the cost of equity. Yield to maturity, that's the return you get from investing in a bond, or the cost of borrowing to the company that issues the bond, YTM, yield to maturity. Net present value and IRR, or internal rate of return. Those are used in corporate finance to analyze investments and to make decisions regarding investments or capital budgeting decisions. Elasticity, which is an economics concept, and that shows how demand varies in response to a change in price. And then LIFO and FIFO, last in, first out, and first in, first out, are stock inventory valuation methods. Okay, so that's important in financial reporting. All of those are just examples of core subjects or core concepts that we cover in class to make sure you are really comfortable with them. So we do lots of exercises on them. We show how they are likely to be examined and get you prepared to answer questions on these topics. Okay, and then we also have on the right-hand side, home study, which is the more factual learning. So these topics, as it says at the bottom, are not as frequently examined as the core subjects, but the exam is likely it will have some questions from these topics. They are very factual though. They're just about learning some definitions or just learning, for example, auction markets. What type of auction markets are there? So for example, there are Dutch auctions, a few examples of different types of auctions. Maybe you'll get a question on that, maybe you won't. Okay, but this home study or factual learning is all about knowing the curriculum more broadly. Okay, so in the course we focus on the core concepts and we give you guidance on what you need to know in terms of the factual reading, but we do not spend much time in the course on this more factual reading because we can't add as much value to it and because it's better use of your time to focus on the core concepts and to let you look at the other more factual areas at home, and that is what these classes focus on. So the bonus classes, we talk about the more factual reading that you can easily do at home even before the course starts. So that's why we have pre-course reading, with the idea being that when you come to start doing the course and when you start to really get seriously into your studies, you have more time to focus on the core concepts. Okay, so the bonus classes run up until January, and then the course starts right at the end of January. So that's when you really need to get really focused and start studying these core concepts. Okay, and then some other examples: Dow theory, structured notes, CPI bias, and histograms. Okay. And you may or may not know about these areas yet. Don't worry if you don't, because this is something that you are going to learn as you prepare for the exam. Okay, so the level 1 exam happens in June and December next year. So you hopefully are signed up for the June exam, June 2019. And you can see from this area, this table on the left-hand side with the topic areas. We've got the 10 CFA topic areas that I mentioned before, and we've got the 2019 weight in the syllabus, in the curriculum, and then the 2018 weight, just for comparative purposes. So you can see that there have been some changes. Nothing too drastic, but there are some significant changes. So specifically, FRA, financial reporting and analysis, used to be 20% of the exam, and it's now 15% of the exam. So that will be helpful for anyone who does not have a strong background in accounting already. Okay, although we should still bear in mind that 15% is quite a significant weight in the exam. So 15% of the exam now. Ethics is still 15% of the exam as well. So those two are the most important topics in terms of weight in the exam. Quants is 10% down from 12. Economics remains the same at 10%. There is a lot of material on economics though, and we cover most of it in class because it's quite conceptual, okay, and it can be quite difficult to read at home. And there's also a specific kind of you need to know how they're going to be examining you on economics. Okay, so we do practice questions as well to help you with that. Corporate finance has actually gone up a bit from 7 to 10%. Okay, and equity up 1% to 11. Fixed income also 11%. Derivatives 6%. Alternatives 6%, and portfolio management 6% as well. Okay. So that's the content of the exam. In terms of the structure of the exam, you have 2 3-hour exam papers on the same day for level 1 and level 2 and level 3. The first exam is from 9 until midday, and the second exam 2 until 5 p.m. So it seems like you have a long break for lunch, but it goes very quickly, and it takes quite some time to collect the papers at midday, and you need to be back about half an hour before the exam, the second exam, in the afternoon, so you don't have that much time for lunch. Each paper consists of 120 freestanding multiple choice questions. So they are freestanding in the sense that if you get one wrong, it will not impact the next one. And each multiple choice question has 3 possible answers. Given that you have 180 minutes for the exam, the 3-hour exam, you get 1.5 minutes per question. Okay, another thing to note is all of the 10 topics on the left in that table are examined in each paper. And they are all laid out in the same order. So you will get ethics questions first, then quants, then economics, etc. And that is the same order as the CFA curriculum is in. So if you have signed up for the exam, which hopefully you have, you will have already received the CFA curriculum. So you automatically receive it online, the virtual or ebooks. And they are 6 volumes of books, all in this order. So ethics and quants in the first book, economics in the second book, etc. And if you want to, and I recommend you do, you can pay extra and get hard copies of the books. Okay, so personally, I prefer to study with hard copy books, and I know some other students do as well. But I mean, of course, it is up to you. Okay, I think it can just be easier to study with the hard copy books, although you do have to carry them around with you. It depends what works best for you, but I would seriously consider getting the hard copy books if you haven't already. Okay. And just to go back to the question style, so many of the questions are not numerical, not numeric. Okay, they are testing that you understand a concept. They could test that you know a formula without requiring you to do any calculations. So it's not that you will have to memorize some formulas, but the questions are becoming, which you can see from the practice questions that you have, becoming more and more conceptual. Okay, an example would be derivatives. In the readings, the practice questions at the back of the derivatives readings from CFA Institute, there are no calculation questions. Okay, they are all conceptual. Okay. And they're demonstrating that you know something or can apply some concept. So calculation questions are in the minority. You really need to know the material and understand it. Okay. In terms of pass rates, there's a little box here on the left. The minimum passing score is what they would expect, the level they expect you to get to in order to pass the exam. It's not published, so they don't say you need to get 70% in the exam in order to pass, or the pass mark was 70%. But what we do know is around 40% of people pass the exam. Okay, many people underestimate it. There is going to be a lot of studying to do. Okay, it's really worth it if you remember the benefits of the program, and the benefits of being a CFA charter holder is definitely worth the sacrifice. But there will be a sacrifice involved, okay, because you probably already have a busy life. You are going to need to squeeze in study time, and you actually are going to need to prioritize it. So that means that you're not going to be able to do everything else that you currently do. You will have to give up something. So it could be socializing, it could be going to the gym as often, it could be your sleep even. I would not recommend giving up too much sleep though, because you need to remain healthy and rested in order to study effectively. So you're going to need to create a study plan, and we have a study plan spreadsheet that we send to students, and really stick to it as well. So when you think about when you're going to study, and make sure that you actually do study. It needs to become a routine, something that happens automatically without you thinking too much. So really that is critical. And it's great that you're already watching this class, because you're already thinking about the exam. And people who start earlier have a higher chance of success, okay, because there's a lot of material to get through. The sooner you start, the better. I tell students it's a marathon. Okay, so it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's about endurance and starting early, being consistent, being disciplined. So the structure of the curriculum, I mentioned that there are 6 books from CFA Institute. You've got volume 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and they are split in this way with the topics. So ethical and professional standards and quants in the first volume. And then you have at the beginning of each reading, there are 58 readings. At the beginning of each reading, you have learning outcome statements. Okay, so those tell you what you need to be able to do in relation to the material. So if you need to be able to analyze something, calculate something, describe, explain, formulate, identify, prepare, recommend, solve, and that tells you the extent that you need of your knowledge that you need, of the knowledge that you need to have in that area. And every single question in the exam will be based on a learning outcome statement. They will not test anything that is not included in the learning outcome statements. So if you are confident that you have mastered all of the learning outcome statements, then you should pass the exam. Okay, how can you test that? Through practice questions. And CFA Institute gives you lots of practice questions. So at the back of each of the 58 readings, there are practice questions to do. Almost all of them have practice questions. And also you have a candidate resources area of the CFA Institute website where you can get practice questions to do as well. They also provide several practice exams. Okay, so you've got lots of resources, and we encourage students to use those resources during the course, and also in the final consolidation stage at the end of the course, when you should be doing practice exams. Okay, so the best source of questions is CFA Institute, because they write the exams. Okay, so the questions are going to be the most representative, the ones that they give you, of the exam itself. Okay, so critical that you do those. Okay, and they will also all be up to date, because they are updated every year with the curriculum. And that's another point just to note. If you've got old study material, it will not be up to date. Okay, so every year the curriculum changes, and in order to avoid wasting your time on material that's no longer in the curriculum, or missing things that are currently in the curriculum, you need to use the up-to-date study material, okay, which is why you should sign up for the exam, so you can get all of the curriculum readings from CFA Institute. Okay. Okay, so just a little overview of these classes. We're on the 3rd bonus class here, 30th of November. We've already had a Getting Started class, which was an overview of the exam in a bit more detail than I've just given you. And then we've had bonus class 1, which was on ethics, bonus class 2 on quants and financial reporting, and then now bonus class 3 on corporate finance and portfolio management. And then next, on the 14th of December, we will have an introduction to equity, and then finally derivatives and alternatives on the 11th of January. And as I mentioned, you can get access to all of the recordings on YouTube. So this is the timetable for the course. A little bit small, but you can zoom in. 29th of January is when we start. And we've got this class called Success in the Exam. So here we focus on study planning and technique. And actually, there's several things that make a difference and really help you pass the exam. But some things are related just to your study planning and discipline. Okay, it's about and commitment to the program as well. So we really try to keep students on track with with the kind of, I guess, softer side of the preparation process. And we also send countdown emails to students so that you guys know exactly what you should be doing each week and how many weeks you've got left to the exam. So it's just a little reminder to keep on track. Okay. And then we've got, if you look at this whole sort of first block, it's the first block of the teaching phase. And it's followed by a halfway there, or simulad or partial, halfway there practice exam, and then feedback on that practice exam. And so when you do that, you will really start to appreciate better how the real exam is going to be. Okay, so that's a critical practice exam to do. And we find it's really useful for us, or for me as the coordinator of the course, to know how you're doing, and I can address any problems at that stage because I know if you're on track or not. Okay, so really very critical exam, and it will be your first experience, unless you've taken the exam before, of a CFA exam. Okay, so really important one there. And then the second phase of the teaching block, we continue the rest of the academic, the content. So we've got fixed income, derivatives, economics, etc. And then we've got the Heta Final, or the revision phase of the course. Okay, and you can see we've changed the order a little bit in terms of the topics we cover from the CFA curriculum. So we've chosen an order that basically prioritizes the things that might be harder for you and might take longer for you to learn. So for example, in financial reporting and analysis, many people are weak in that area because we don't have many accountants on the program. We don't have many people who've got an accounting background. So for many people that is completely new, and there are lots of formulae to learn. For example, the ratios for ratio analysis, which is one of the most critical parts of the curriculum. Okay. You might also notice actually there are a couple of days where it says we do not have a class. So in general, classes are on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Occasionally, to avoid feriados or holidays, we have had to, we've got space. So that is a time for you to study, if you can, depending on, you might want to take a bit of time off over Carnival, which is fine as long as it's planned into your study plan. And then sometimes we've given you a little break so you can prepare. For example, here at the bottom on the 23rd and 25th of April, you've got time to prepare for the practice exam. Okay, which is this simulado diagnostic exam on the 27th of April. So the practice exams are on Saturdays. This one will be from 9 until 5 p.m. So it's mimicking the real exam, and it's diagnostic because it will identify your weak areas before we start the revision course. And then we start the revision course and we go through all of the content again, but only the most important concepts, and we do lots of practice questions. So the focus of the revision course is on practice questions to get you ready for the exam. And then you've got a little bit of time between the 28th of May, which is the final class, and the exam, which is on the 15th of June, in order to do more practice exams. And you should be doing the practice exams from the CFA Institute website then to consolidate your knowledge. So the methodology that we follow is teaching first, then practicing and revision, and then consolidation through practice exams. Okay, and that is a tried and tested teaching methodology that works. We just require your commitment in order to follow the program so that you're fully prepared for the exam. Okay, so pre-course reading. This table shows you the study session, the reading assignment, which is the reading number. Remember, there are 58 readings. So some of those we have selected as pre-course reading for you. Okay, and then we've got the importance of the reading in the third column. So you can see there are 3 critical readings, and one of them is on ethics, reading 3, and then the other 2 are on quants. Okay. There are actually only 4 critical readings in the whole curriculum. So one is ethics, 2 are on quants, time value of money and discounted cash flows, and then the other one is on financial statement interpretation, which is ratio analysis, basically understanding financial statements, okay, which is not here as home study or pre-course reading, because we cover it in depth in the course. Okay, and actually these are the 3 here that are in the pre-course reading, we cover them again on the course. Okay, it's just useful for you to already have an idea about those readings, to already have a kind of sense of what's in them before we start the course. Okay, we'll put you ahead. And the next column gives you the title of the reading, suggested number of hours in total to spend on the reading, and then the pre-course reading number of hours. So this pre-course reading number of hours is how many hours we recommend you spend on the reading before the course starts. You can spend more on it, but we want you to make sure you get through all of the pre-course reading. So if you spend a disproportionate amount of time on ethics, then you're not going to be able to get through to quants, and you're not going to be able to get through to financial reporting and analysis. And the whole point of the pre-course reading is to give you an overview, an introduction, not too much depth, but an idea about the content in each of these areas. Okay, so it's important to try to keep up with the bonus classes. Okay, so for today we've got class 3, and we're just going to talk briefly about corporate finance and portfolio management and what you should be doing for pre-course reading. Okay. So remember, we're going to focus on the more factual areas in the pre-course reading. We also have a study plan and a getting started guide. So the study plan is the one I mentioned before. It's an Excel spreadsheet which will help you plan your time and when you're going to fit studying in to your schedule. So some people study at lunchtime, some study in the mornings, some in the evenings, some at weekends. When I was studying, I used to study every Saturday. Okay, so that worked for me. I spent the whole day, pretty much, studying. You have to be realistic though. So I did have breaks. It was probably about 8 hours that I spent studying on Saturdays. Okay, with breaks. So I would study for an hour and a half, have a break. And that's another point. Some people don't study effectively for an hour and a half, so they need to study just for an hour or even 40 minutes. And some people can study for 2 hours and then have a break. So you need to work with what is good for you. Okay, and it is important to be studying actively. You can't be studying and falling asleep. It won't, or you're not going to absorb what you're reading and what you're doing, what practice questions you're doing. So the study plan helps you plan out your time, and it has a list of all of the readings in it, and you can tick the readings off once you've done them. And then we've also got a getting started guide, which has guidance on the pre-course reading and supports you, and we provide support, with any questions that you have. Okay, so that can be via WhatsApp or it can be via email. Okay, we've got an email called cfa1@shptraining.com, which you will see at the end of this presentation. Okay, and then there will be a quiz on the pre-course reading during the first class of the course. Okay, so come prepared. So in that first class, the success in the exam class, we also have a little quiz on the pre-course reading just to help you. Okay. Okay, so has anyone started reading from the curriculum? Anyone started? Okay, well, if you've started, if you signed up for the exam, you have access to the curriculum already, okay? So you will see when you open it up, which is the first step, that you have 58 readings, all organised into different books, and you can get the menu up on the left-hand side. Okay. Also, you can access the readings via an app, so you can download the app, and then you can access the readings in that way. So they all start. Each of the readings starts with learning outcome statements, and there's an example down here for ethics of what you should be able to do. So the candidate should be able to demonstrate, distinguish, recommend. Okay, those are the learning outcome statements that are at the beginning of each reading. And then in the reading, I would not recommend necessarily reading everything. You should focus on the learning outcome statements, okay, because that's what you need to be able to achieve in the end, okay. And there are actually optional sections of the reading, some readings, and you don't need to read it all. They're just given as additional information. And you probably will find that the CFA curriculum is useful as a reference in the future. So it's useful now, but it's also going to be useful to you in the future, even after the exam, because there's a lot of really useful reference material in there. Okay, but for the exam itself, focus on the learning outcome statements. Answer the questions at the end of the reading within 24 hours of completing the reading. It's really surprising what you can forget unless you start practicing as soon as you can after doing the reading. And then the questions that you get wrong, make sure you mark them as wrong, so highlight them so you can come back to them, or maybe just write down a list of the question numbers that you got wrong. But you need to be able to go back to them, and it might be now or it might be during the course, and make sure you're getting them right, okay, because we have to learn from our mistakes, otherwise we are not going to move forward. Okay, so make sure you learn from your mistakes, and the way to do that is practice questions that you got wrong and make sure you're getting them right. Okay. So you will find your own way of approaching the readings, but this is a recommended process to follow, so 4 steps. Okay, so in terms of corporate finance, it covers study sessions 10 and 11. So 2 study sessions is 10% of the June 2019 exam. We have 2 3-hour classes during the teaching phase of the course, plus we will cover corporate finance in the exam debrief after the diagnostic exam. I didn't mention that before, but we have debrief sessions on each of the exams that you do as part of the course, where we go through problem areas. And then we've got a revision class, which also covers corporate finance. So you can see we've got 5 readings here, 33 to 37. We've got the importance of the reading, the title, the number of learning outcome statements in the reading, the highest priority CFA curriculum questions, which are at the back of the reading, suggested total number of hours that you spend on that reading during your entire study preparation, and then the pre-course reading time allocation, which you can see here is very small. It's only 1 hour. Okay, so maybe say to yourself, this weekend I'm going to look at this corporate finance reading and I'm going to spend 1 hour on it, and just see how far you get, see how it goes, see if it generates any questions, just get familiar. Okay, so it's about starting softly, starting easily with these readings. And the first one on corporate governance and ESG, environmental, social and governmental factors. An introduction is an easy reading. It's factual. There's quite a lot of information in it, but it's not too technical. Okay, so this is why it's been set as home study. Okay, and it's not something we focus on in the course. We will give a brief overview of it, but we will not go into a lot of detail. So you do need to read it either now or once the course starts. And ideally read it now so that you're in a good position once the course has started, and you can spend more time focusing on what we do cover in the course in more detail, which is capital budgeting, how to decide between investment projects with a limited amount of funding available, cost of capital, so weighted average cost of capital, cost of debt, cost of preference shares, cost of equity, measures of leverage, and we've got operational and financial leverage, and then working capital management. So working capital is the financing a company needs for its operations. A company will buy inventory, convert that inventory into a finished good, sell the inventory, and it has to wait for a while to receive the cash from its customer. In the meantime, it has to pay its suppliers, so it has to finance that payment to suppliers somehow. So we look at working capital management in corporate finance. So the pre-course reading that's required, this is set out in our study guide, Getting Started Study Guide, which I mentioned before. So we've got 5 readings. I've already given you a bit of an introduction. Capital budgeting is very important because it has some core concepts in it, like the internal rate of return and net present value used for selecting investment projects. Okay, and it builds on quants from reading 6 and 7, which are those two of the 4 critical readings in the CFA curriculum, and they come in again also in fixed income. So those quants readings really are critical. So they come into corporate finance, they also go into fixed income. Okay. So pre-course work is reading 33. Okay, 1 hour on corporate governance and environmental, social, and governance factors, which looks at best practice for companies to follow when aligning the interests of management with those of shareholders. I think I said governmental before, I'm afraid, guys, sorry, governance. Okay, it does not require any prior knowledge, this reading. Okay, so it's a perfect reading for home study. So please make sure you read it. Okay, and these are the learning outcome statements for that reading. So I don't want to go into them in too much depth, okay, but it's good to know what's in this reading, right? So we've got describe corporate governance, what is it? Describe a company's stakeholders. Describe the principal-agent relationship, so that's critical in corporate governance. Why do we need a system of controls, which is what corporate governance is basically, in order to make sure that the principal, who is the shareholder of a company, benefits from what the company is doing. It is a method or methodology, a way of aligning the interests of the agents, who are the directors of the company who make the decisions regarding the company, with the principals, who are the owners or shareholders of the company. Okay, we consider other stakeholders as well in corporate management, corporate governance, so that's why we talk about stakeholders here. Describe mechanisms to manage the relationships, stakeholder relationships. That's relationship between the company and its employers, or the company and the government, or the company and its customers, etc., or suppliers. Describe the function of the board of directors and its committees. So, for example, we have an audit committee, a remuneration committee, a nominations committee for new board members. Market and non-market factors. So there are certain things that a company, it will find that its share price goes up if it pursues certain corporate governance actions, because the market sees that as favourable, for example. Potential risks of poor governance. So a company that's not well run faces certain risks. It might not do as well as a result. What do we need to consider when we're analysing corporate governance? Environmental and social considerations that we use in investment analysis, becoming more and more important this. And describe how environmental, social and governance factors may be used in investment analysis. Okay, another area that's becoming more and more important. Okay, and then portfolio management. So here we've got 3 readings, which are set as home study. One of them is a very new and exciting reading, okay, which you might want to start with, I don't know. I'll go into that in a minute. So 6% of the exam, 2 study sessions, and you've got 6 readings here. We have 1 3-hour class in the course, and that's because more of this topic can be set as home study. Okay, and it's only 6% of the exam. Okay, so it doesn't have such a high weighting. We've also got the exam debrief, so 1 3-hour class, exam debrief, and a revision class that includes portfolio management. Okay, so if you look at the readings here, the first one, reading 38, is an overview. So that's a really good reading to give you an overview of portfolio management, as it says. It's low importance, well, because you won't be tested probably specifically on this reading, but you need to read it so that you have an overview of what we mean by portfolio management. Okay, so it's very useful from that point of view. Readings 39 and 40 are going to be covered in class. It's when we actually calculate risk and return for a portfolio, so really important to cover that in class because it's conceptual and it's critical for the exam. And then we've got portfolio management study session 13. Okay, the second portfolio management study session. So basics of portfolio planning and construction covered in class, risk management and introduction. So this is another introductory reading on risk management for portfolios, and that's set as home study as well. And then fintech in investment management. So this is the new one of the new readings for 2019, which is a really interesting reading. Okay, so you can see 1 hour of home study has been allocated to that. Also worth noting is that portfolio management becomes more important as you work through the levels. So level 1 to 3, okay, becomes, I think it's 55% of the exam at level 3. So it's worth investing some time in it to make sure you're confident with it. So just looking at the pre-course work, reading 38 will give you an understanding of the context of portfolio management, and reading 42 will cover risk management. So home study both of those. And then reading 43 on fintech, again, set as home study. So portfolio management and overview, learning outcome statements. Describe the portfolio approach to investing. Describe types of investors and distinctive characteristics and needs of each. So who are investors? We have individual investors who would be high net worth individuals, and we have institutional investors, for example, insurance companies, pension funds, banks. Those are the main ones. Endowments. So for example, a university endowment fund would be another example, or a foundation, which is set up specifically, but it has more flexibility in its spending. Okay, so that you should know more about each of those types of investor and what their characteristics are. Describe defined contribution and defined benefit plans. Why is this important? A defined benefit plan will have both have portfolios of assets that they need to manage. Okay, and there is some overlap here between financial reporting and portfolio management in terms of knowing a little bit about these pensions, how they work, and what their objectives are. Okay. Describe the steps in the portfolio management process, and describe mutual funds and compare them with pooled investment products. Okay, so that gives you an overview of portfolio management. And then we've got risk management. So what is risk management? What are the risks? Sorry, what are the features of a risk management framework? How do we govern risk? How do we control risk, basically, within a company? How does risk tolerance affect risk management? So we've got to decide the level of risk, the amount of risk that we're willing to take. How do we budget risk? So that means allocating the amount of risk that each area of a business can take or can assume. Identify financial and non-financial sources of risk and describe how they interact. Okay, and describe methods. For example, reputational risk could lead to financial risk later. Okay, can really impact a company. Describe methods for measuring and modifying risk exposures and factors to consider in choosing among the methods. Okay, so how do we measure risk? It's important. And then fintech in investment management. So what do we mean by fintech? We keep hearing about fintech. What do we mean by it? Big data, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. So all important in the modern world and in investment management in the modern world. Describe fintech applications to investment management, and then financial applications of distributed ledger technology or blockchain. Okay, so really updated, relevant. Some changes in the curriculum which show, as I was mentioning at the beginning, one of the benefits is about having real world expertise. Okay, so you're going to build knowledge that is really relevant to the world as it is now, because the CFA curriculum is constantly updated. Okay. And then just a little introduction to equity, which is going to be the subject of the next bonus class on the 14th of December. So it's 11% of the exam, 2 study sessions, 6 readings, and quite a lot of this, as you can see, is set as home study, because a lot of the equity is about understanding or knowing how stock markets work, the different types, market efficiency, which we actually cover again in class, equity securities, so you've got preference shares and ordinary shares, what are the characteristics of them, and then industry and company analysis. I expect you may well have covered Porter's 5 forces. That comes up here. It's not something we cover in the course because it's again not too difficult a concept, and it's not a core part of the curriculum. Maybe you might get a question on it, but maybe not. Okay. And then the main thing that we focus on in the class is equity valuation. So how do we value a share, or how do we value a company? Okay, that's quite an interesting area of the curriculum. Okay, so just for anyone who has not signed up for the course, Course values here, we've got a deadline of the 21st of December, okay, and we have fee deadlines like CFA Institute does, with the reason being that it really is a good idea to start studying as soon as you can, and if you can get our support, then you can hopefully manage to get started with that sooner and ask questions, okay. We really support our students. We've got small groups, that we have around 10 students, which means you get a lot of individual attention. Okay, and we also have the online format for the classes as well as in the classroom, and the classes are recorded, so you can watch a recording if you miss a class. Okay, so if you want to get more information about this, as you can see, you can pay by PayPal as well. If you want more information, please contact us, and Anna, our sales consultant, probably will be the contact that you speak to. So you can get her on WhatsApp, or you can send an email to contact@shptraining.com, or just reply to one of the emails you've already received from us. You can also look on the website for more information. Okay. So thank you for joining us today. I know some of you may be missing lunch, or will have a late lunch, or maybe had to have an early lunch. So if there are any questions, please let me know. Okay. I'm gonna just end the recording now, but I'm available for questions. Okay.